This is Rock and Roll English. Real people, real English. Here's your host, Martin Johnston.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Rock and Roll English. Episode number 79, I think. I can't actually check in this moment because the website's down. When I say the website's down, I mean it's not working. That is because we're doing all the stuff for the members area. We don't know what we're doing and it's taking a long time. So apologies if you've tried to access the website in the last couple of days and it's not been working. But by the time you listen to this, it should be resolved. And all of the rock and roll vocabulary from today's podcast is on that fantastic website, rockandrollenglish.com. After you listen, go there, memorise the vocab and use it, baby. Anyway, here is me and Dan speaking about being humble. If you don't know what that means, you will find out in the next few seconds. Happy listening. Dan the man, how are you today?
I'm very well. How are you?
Always fantastic, Dan. Have you done anything romantic in the last week?
No, I've spent most of my time talking to you, so...
See, that's the difference between you and me, Dan. You're romantic just one day of the year on Valentine's Day. I'm romantic 365 days of the year.
Oh, really? Did you kiss Mrs. Rock and Roll English in public for more than 1 second this week?
3 seconds, and the answer to that question is no. I said it last week, I'll say it again. That's my cut-off point. That's the maximum, okay?
Okay.
Anyway, Dan, how do we start the show?
With a review.
Very good. Do you think we have a review?
Yes.
He's seen it again. He's seen it. Yes, we do. I apologise before I read the name, but it's from Andriy Shrovchenkov, which, again, I apologise for. But it says, hello from Ukraine. Guys, you're marvellous. Both you, Martin and Dan the man. Martin was first. That's the way we like it. Actually, this show wouldn't be so appealing if it weren't for Dan's short and sweet responses to Martin's provocations. I don't know if that's a compliment for me there for the provocations or for you for your short and sweet responses, Dan.
Well, I'm pretty sure it's me, but if you want to take that as a compliment, you go ahead.
I'll take anything I'm given. One thing is true, though. It's some rockin' second conditional. Anyway, you're bantering, joshing and jibing. Too much rock and roll vocab, I reckon. Too much for me often, because I have to write the quiz after. Anyway, make this show most boringly hilarious and hilariously boring in the world. Love you, mate. Keep rolling.
Boom.
Oh, yeah, baby. Thanks a lot for that.
We didn't actually get that many reviews on Facebook that week.
Yeah, we mentioned it, didn't we?
Yeah.
But not many people did.
Yeah.
So remember, you can leave reviews on Facebook now, okay? Because iTunes is a bit of a bastard to leave them on. But now Facebook is also a bastard, but less of a bastard.
It would also be cool if people left the review on Facebook in their native language, I think.
But how would we read that, Dan?
Because Facebook translates it.
Oh, does it? Oh, fantastic. Oh, thanks, Dan. Okay, so anyway, do you know what we're talking about today, Dan?
No.
Of course you don't. I haven't told you. So we are talking about how to be humble because I think tomorrow is Be Humble Day.
Oh, really? It must be a hard day for you.
Well, let's first talk about what does humble mean, Dictionary Dan?
It basically means when you don't think too highly of yourself.
That's okay, Dictionary Dan. Normally it's better, your definitions. Yeah, when you are modest, let's say. I've got an example, actually. Cristiano Ronaldo. Do you know him?
Yes, of course. Everyone knows who he is.
Personally?
Yes, actually. He listens to the show.
Yeah, exactly. He recently said, I am the best footballer that has ever lived. Is that a humble thing to say?
Not really, no.
No.
Did he really say that?
Yeah, when he won the Ballon d'Or. And Messi never says anything. And is he humble?
Yes.
Exactly.
Who do you think's better?
difficult question. That I could have a whole podcast on that, Dan. So we're not going to get into that. So I say we're not going to get into that means we're not going to start talking about it. What we are going to talk about is some tips from Mother Teresa about how to be more humble.
God, you're name dropping a lot of people today, aren't you?
Yeah, very nice. Name dropping is a nice term, actually. It's generally when you talk about famous people you know, which I actually don't know any of these people. But here's a funny story for you. When I was a kid, I thought Mother Teresa and Mother Nature were the same person.
What the fuck? Are you serious?
Yeah.
How old are you?
Oh, I don't know. I was a kid, Dan. I don't know why we say Mother Nature, though. Do you?
Well, I don't know.
Also, Mother Teresa. She's not she's not alive anymore, but she wasn't my mum. Was she your mum?
No, she wasn't mine either. No.
Why are we calling her mother then? Anyway, so let's look at some of these tips from Mother Teresa, not Mother Nature. The first one is to speak as little as possible. I thought, Dan, you've got that down to a T, haven't you?
And you speak too much.
So if you've got something down to a T, it means you've perfected it. And Dan has definitely perfected this ability to speak as little as possible.
Well, I think it's only important to speak when you've got something to say, and I very rarely do, so...
Well, exactly. Well, then just listen to Mother Teresa. So, you're doing your bit for society, Dan. And being humble.
Do you think I'm humble?
Well, let's look at the rest of the test, Dan. Okay.
This is my test.
Well, I'm always testing you, Dan. I test you every day in life. Okay.
Okay.
Just to keep you on your toes. And remember, to keep someone on their toes means to keep them sort of alert or like prepared all the time. The next one, which I know you do, Dan, is practice gratitude.
Yes.
So tell us how you do that.
I write things down I'm grateful for every day.
Oh, Dan, he's such a model, like, human being, isn't he? Such a man.
Do you?
Yeah, you know I do, Dan. We both do. Not together. We don't do it together.
Have you ever written your grateful for me?
You know what, Dan? The next question on the piece of paper I have in front of me was to ask you if you have ever written that you are grateful for me.
I got there first. I beat you to it.
You did beat me to it, which means exactly that. I got there first. I might have done, Dan, I'll have to check, but I might have done. What about you?
I might have done. I'll have to check.
Oh, touche. And touche, which I said there, is a kind of French word. Well, kind of. It is a French word that we use when someone basically says something intelligent. It's the first time I've ever used it on the podcast. Why do you think that is, Dan?
I'm not even going to answer that.
It's the first time Dan has ever said anything intelligent on this podcast. Anyway, Dan, the next one, which is a bit confusing because the first point was to speak as little as possible. And now this point says speak your mind. So what does it mean if you speak your mind?
It's when you normally are rude, I think.
Yeah, well, it's basically to say what you think.
I really hate that. When someone says, I say what I think, I'll say it to your face. I think, well, you're a fucking idiot.
Yes, I agree. So if I always spoke my mind, people would kill me. What conditional is that, Dan?
I will go for third.
Second. Remember, second concerns the present, Dan. The third concerns the past. For example, in a lesson, yesterday, lesson with some of my teenagers, they were talking and I was thinking, the little bastards, why don't they just shut up? Imagine if I had said that, Dan. What would have happened? What conditional's that?
Third.
Oh, boom. Finally, the penny has dropped. So when the penny has dropped, it means you finally understand something. Yes, so I agree. I don't think it's a good idea to always speak your mind. And I always change my mind as well, which means I change idea.
Like the wind.
So if you change your mind like the wind, it's change your mind easily. In that same lesson, though, the same kids who I thought were little bastards, 10 minutes later said something funny, made me laugh, and I thought, it's not too bad.
Yeah, you're fickle.
Rock and roll vocabulary there, Dan. I can't explain it. I'm not Dictionary Martin, so I think we need Dictionary Dan to explain that.
It just means when you change your mind all the time. So you could call someone who is fickle, who supports different teams depending on where they are in the league. They're fickle.
Always football example. I like it, Dan. And another one here is to accept criticism, because humble people do not fear criticism and they are willing to look at themselves. Do you accept criticism well, Dan?
I'm not answering that because I'm sure you have an answer for it, so you go ahead.
I think you go off the handle when I criticise you. So if you go off the handle, it means like you go crazy, get angry. But I think that you only go off the handle with me. I think when Mrs. Dan the Man criticises you, you say, yes, you're right, yes.
Well, no, when she criticises me, and she does a lot, I don't like it, but with you it feels like an attack.
That's it. This is exactly it. All of the listeners are witnesses. Sometimes I try and give him some sort of constructive criticism, like, try not to move your head when you're talking on the mic, because it's annoying for me. It makes it difficult to edit the podcast. What the fuck are you talking about, you fucking bastard?
No.
And goes off the handle.
I've noticed as well that recently, maybe the past few months, you preempt the criticism by saying, this isn't a criticism, and then you go on to criticise me.
Because it's not. It's constructive criticism. It's feedback, Dan, okay? Yeah. And be humble and accept it.
How about you? Do you accept criticism?
Oh, I love it, Dan. I love it.
Okay.
For example, I was criticised recently on the Facebook Live on the private group, the members group that we have, because people said
you were criticised.
I didn't interact enough. It's a small criticism. They said I didn't interact with the people. What did I do next time, Dan?
You interacted.
I interacted, baby. Anyway, the next one is treat everyone equally. Do you treat everyone equally?
I think so, yeah.
Well, I do as well, Dan. This is exactly why I hate the monarchy, which we are going to talk about in tomorrow's full volume episode, Dan.
Oh, brilliant. Although, if you're not treating the monarchy equally, if you're slagging them off, so...
Nice word there. Slagging someone off is like speaking badly about them. No, but I think they are equal to me, Dan. I don't think they're better than me, or I don't think they are worse than me. I think they are equal, because we should treat everyone equally, Dan.
No, you should put it on a poster and sell it.
I will. So the next one is to accept insults and injuries, okay? I find this one difficult with my football injury that happened 10 years ago, and I still haven't accepted that because I still can't walk. What about you, Dan? Can you accept insults and injuries?
I don't really understand the question. So what, physical injuries?
Well, you can interpret the question as you want, Dan. Insults, you accept insults well, though, don't you? I insult you quite a lot on this show, so...
Well, it's not I accept them, I just get used to them.
Nice. So when you get used to something, it becomes normal for you, let's say. Yeah. Well, I'm glad to know, Dan. I'm glad to know. And the next one I find strange. It says, do not seek to be loved. What does it mean to seek, Dan?
Search.
Yeah, is that so? Do not search for love. I mean, which human being does not search for love?
Well, I thought you, actually. I thought if there was one person who doesn't seek love, it might be you.
Well, that's not the case, Dan. Okay, well, maybe it's true. Love found me, Dan. I didn't look for love. Love found me.
Are you in love?
Why would you ask such a stupid question?
I'm curious, as are the listeners. Are you in love?
Dan, as I said, I'm not scared to be romantic. So yes, I am. Are you? Dan will only say this on Valentine's Day. That's the difference. Exactly what I said at the beginning of the show. Sure. Don't answer, Dan. Don't answer. Okay?
Yes. Because if I don't answer it, I'm going to get an earful.
So an earful would be like a telling off, which is when someone sort of shouts at you, let's say. But I backed him into a corner there. He had no option except to answer. We know he didn't want to answer, but I pushed him into a corner and made him answer.
I see what you're doing. Okay. Making that confrontation even worse for me.
Anyway, Dan, I will let you get out of the corner and we'll move to the next point now, which is to learn from humble leaders. And it's got a few examples, and one of them is Gandhi. which I know you have a special relationship with Gandhi because one, people used to call you Gandhi at school.
Yeah, correct.
Which you used to love that, didn't you, Dan?
Yes.
And two, I know you've read his book, haven't you, Dan?
Oh, God, it's the worst book in the world as well. I felt like my eyes were bleeding by the end of it.
I remember Dan actually saying, I've bought Gandhi's book, I'm going to read it. And I thought, that sounds interesting. And then I said, how was it? And I specifically remember you saying, he's a fucking boring cunt.
And I stand by that.
Remember, the C word is not a nice word, but you used a nice term there, Dan, when you said, I stand by that. It's like, I haven't changed my mind. I still think that decision is correct. Well, that's a good recommendation for the book if anyone wants to read it.
Yeah.
So another one is to be free of expectations. Okay, so I thought, Dan, you're 33. Did you have any expectations for what you would be doing at this point in your life? Or had you always dreamed of being a freelance human being?
I'd always dreamed of that, yeah. I don't think I'd anticipated that I'd be speaking to you every single day of the week.
Well, Dan, I know you love it, okay? Just remember to write it in your gratitude journal, okay?
As should you.
Oh, I will, Dan. I already do. Another one here is to thank God often and always. I've just got a small question for Mother Teresa here. Is it often or always? Because they're not the same thing.
Yeah, it's a good point.
So, Mother Teresa, okay, next time you write these humble rules, just stop and think about it, okay? Stop and think about these words, because it's confusing.
She's dead, yeah, because you're talking as if like she's going to hear this.
Yes, I did know that, Dan. She died about a week after Princess Diana. I remember it well.
Oh, right.
I can see how upset you were by both of those people passing away, Dan. Remember, passing away is like a nice way to say die, because I want to be nice, because it's obviously a delicate situation.
Well, I was about 10, so I probably didn't care at the time.
Yeah, we were a bit older than that, about 12 actually, Dan, but never mind.
No, she died in 94, didn't she?
94? What are you talking about? 97, Dan.
Did she really?
Yes, 97. Come on, Dan. I can't believe you don't know that.
I should have cared.
You should have cared, yeah. Nice connected speech there. Should have cared. I should have cared. Modal verbs in the past, Dan. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Sure you did. Another one is it says humble people excel as leaders. Okay? And I was just thinking about the referendum we had that time. Do you remember what happened?
Well, I'm still pushing for a second referendum, okay? I think the people want it.
I'll tell you what, Dan, if they do a second referendum for Brexit, I will do a second referendum for rock and roll English.
Okay. Do you think that will happen?
Well, if that's not a good reason for another Brexit referendum, Dan, I don't know what is.
Exactly, yeah. Do you think that will happen?
Well, part of me hopes yes, because obviously I'm not happy with the decision, but part of me thinks it makes a mockery of democracy. So when I say it makes a mockery, it makes a joke of democracy to say, okay, we'll let you decide. And then they say, well, actually, no, you decided and we don't really like that, so we need to change it. So I don't really know, Dan, is the answer to that question. But I was thinking we need to do a podcast on Brexit, Dan.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm sure people will be interested because, me and Dan are still crying every day. We both still live in Europe, so maybe they will send us home, Dan.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Anyway, to finish the podcast, Dan, I've got some advice for you again.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for this constant advice that you're giving me.
You're welcome, Dan. You're welcome. Okay, so it's from Saint Augustine. I don't know how to pronounce that.
Augustine, yeah.
Augustine, sure. I know him well. It says, it was pride that changed angels into devils. It is humility that makes men angels.
Okay, yeah. I don't think I'm going to be reciting that one anytime soon, but yeah, thank you.
So if you recite something that's like you use it again, let's say, in future, well, you should think about it, Dan, okay?
Okay, yeah. So what have you learned from this podcast? What have you learned from this research?
Well, in fact, I was just about to say, I think you've passed the humble test, Dan, okay?
Oh, thank you. Have you?
I don't know. You tell me.
Or let the listeners decide.
Okay, well, I'll speak to you again next week and tomorrow in the full members area, Dan.
Yeah, correct. All right, I'll see you there.
See you later. Okay, so that was me and Dan speaking about being humble. So let's look at that rock and roll vocabulary, which is on the website, rockandrollenglish.com. We had, I'm not getting into who is better, Ronaldo or Messi. So if you don't want to get into something, you don't want to talk about it. We had name dropping as well. Dan said that as a joke, really, because normally if you name drop, you talk about famous people you know. You say, for example, last night I went out with Beyonce. God, she's crazy, isn't she? And on Monday I went out with Michael Jackson. And, although he's actually dead, but never mind. That's name dropping, talking about famous people you know. We also had got that down to a T when I said speaking as little as possible. You've got that down to a T, haven't you, Dan? It means you've perfected something. We also had keep you on your toes, which is to keep someone like alert and always prepared. Dan said he beat me to it when he asked me something. I can't remember. A real nice piece of vocabulary was touche. I don't know if you say that in other languages because we stole it from French. It's basically when someone says like an intelligent thing in response to you, like a comeback. Maybe if I insult you and then you insult me, a better insult, I would say, touche. We had speak your mind, which is like say what you think. We also had the penny has dropped, which is when you finally understand something. It takes some time, like it did for Dan, to understand. Then the penny drops and you understand. Dan also said, I change my mind like the wind. If you change your mind like the wind, you change your mind easily, which is also if you are fickle, which is another thing he accused me of. We also had go off the handle. When I said Dan goes off the handle when I criticise him, that means he goes crazy. We also had slagging someone off. If you slag someone off, you speak badly about them. And we had the word seek when we said do not seek to be loved, which is similar. Dan said it's search is similar to search or look for. The difference is with seek, generally it's something you know you won't get. For example, seek love. It's like, I know I won't get love, but I will seek love. You cannot say, for example, I'm seeking my keys. That just doesn't work. Generally for things like this, seeking love, seeking happiness, seeking stuff like that. Dan said he was going to get an earful from Mrs. Dan the Man. If you get an earful from someone, it's someone that shouts at you, basically, tells you off. He also said, I stand by that when I said that he had said in the past that Gandhi was a boring boop. And he said, yes, I stand by that. It means that I still think the same. I have not changed my mind. We had pass away. When someone passes away, they die. But it's like a nice way to talk about a thing which is not very nice. Had a nice term when I said like the new Brexit referendum, if they do one, makes a mockery of democracy. So something makes a mockery of, it makes a joke of, makes it sound stupid. And at the end, Dan said that he won't be reciting my quote. He won't be repeating it, basically. Anyway, that's the end of today's podcast. All of this rock and roll vocabulary is on the website, rockandrollenglish.com. Go there. Hopefully the site will be working. And if you are a full volume member, I will speak to you tomorrow. If you're not, I will speak to you next Monday. In both cases, the important thing is to just keep on rocking.
Thanks so much for listening to Rock and Roll English. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit rockandrollenglish.com and facebook.com/rockandrollenglish. We'll catch you next time.